Hey everyone, you might have seen our recent video talking about the tow bar part of the towing system for our Jeep. Today we're going to talk about the braking system and some Jeep Cherokee specific items that you might want to be aware of if you choose a vehicle the same as ours. The braking system is going to be relevant to most anybody who's going to be towing 4-down, but some of those items are going to be specific to the Jeeps, but there's going to be great information for everyone, so stay tuned. Welcome back everyone. If you hadn't seen our recent video talking about the tow bar piece of the towing setup for our 4-down towing with the Jeep, be sure to check that video out. We'll put a link in the description below. But today's video we're going to be talking about the braking system and some of the vehicle specific items for the Jeep Cherokee. Again, the braking system can be used on virtually any car that's going to be towed 4-down, but some of the items we're going to talk about today are specific to the Jeep, but there might still be things to keep in mind because when you're choosing a car to be towed 4-down, make sure you're aware of any specific things to that vehicle. Some vehicles might say that they're able to be towed 4-down, and that means, in the manufacturer's term, might mean, yes, this vehicle in general can be towed, but there's specific options that need to be on that vehicle to be towed. Sometimes aftermarket installers can make those modifications for you, but definitely do your research when you're making that decision. Alright, so we love our Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk. We are super happy with this, and we were well researched going into this decision on what items are going to be required to put this vehicle into neutral and what items need to be addressed to be able to tow it 4-down. And that's part of the reason we chose the system we did. Alright, so let's talk about the braking system we chose for our Jeep. We chose a Roadmaster Invisibrake braking system, and there's a few reasons for that. First and foremost, we really like Roadmaster as a company. We feel they build a really great product. But second of all, the Invisibrake braking system is especially great for this Jeep, partially because the Invisibrake is super simple. All you need to do to turn on the braking system with the Invisibrake is plug in the cord that you do for plugging in the lights. Anytime you're going to be towing a vehicle 4-down behind any RV, you're going to want to set up the tail lights either integrated into the system of the actual car so that the turn signals and the brake lights and the hazard lights all match up with the towing vehicle, or you can put some aftermarket ones that use magnets to attach to the vehicle. If you're going to go through the expense of setting up a car for 4-down, I personally think it's worth going the extra mile and getting the wiring done to where it's using the original equipment, the original lights. One is that it looks a lot nicer, not having the magnets on top of the paint and potential scratching. One less thing to lose, and it's just a lot easier setup when all you have to do is plug in the umbilical cord for the lights and your lights are good to go. What's really cool about the Invisibrake system is that cord that you plug in to activate the lights for your tow vehicle is all you need to do to be able to turn on the Invisibrake system, because the Invisibrake system works off of the brake signal of the brake taillights. So whenever you use your brakes in the motorhome, the brakes using Invisibrake will activate in the towed vehicle. If you're not familiar with braking systems for tow vehicles, there are two basic types. There's progressive and proportional. Progressive braking systems basically take the signal from the tow vehicle that the brakes need to be applied, and over a course of a few seconds, they ramp up braking force however long you have your foot on the brake pedal of the towing vehicle, regardless of the pressure being applied. A proportional braking system, basically however much pressure you put on the towing vehicle is how much pressure it gets put on the towed vehicle. They're always matching up in a proportional system. Invisibrake is a progressive system, meaning if you lightly touch your foot onto the brake pedal of the towing vehicle, the braking force on the towed vehicle is going to steadily ramp up over the course of 8 seconds to be reaching maximum braking force at 8 seconds. So if you're the kind of person who occasionally lets your foot rest on the brake pedal, that might be putting undue strain and stress on your towed vehicle. But if you're mindful about how you're using your braking force, you can basically treat a progressive as if it's proportional by using firmer, shorter pressure on your towing vehicle. Though proportional are often looked at as a superior braking solution in braking, I actually really like the Invisibrake because I like that it's super simple to turn on, because the Jeep is actually a really lengthy process to put into neutral, and so I like the simplicity of plugging in the Invisibrake and being done. All it is plugging that cord in, and I use my gears a lot for my braking force, and I tend to use my braking similar to how a progressive system works. Another type of braking system you might see are portable braking systems like brake buddies, and they're large bulky items that you end up putting between the front driver's seat and the brake pedal, and those systems push on the brake pedal. Some are proportional, some are progressive, but those are a common thing. But Invisibrake, there's nothing to put in and out of the vehicle at any time. The Invisibrake system mounts underneath our driver's seat. You can also install these further back in some kind of bay in the back of the vehicle or wherever it's convenient. It's a very small unit that can be mounted in a lot of different places. One of the differences with Invisibrake versus the ones that put pressure on the front of the brake pedal is Invisibrake has a cable that runs up on a pulley behind the brake pedal, and it pulls on the brake pedal to activate the brakes. Now, the reason you might be wondering, how can it do that with enough force? And the reason it does is because it keeps your braking system active. Because it keeps your system active, Invisibrake's installation is a little bit more lengthy process. You need to do a more lengthy install under the hood of the towed vehicle. So be aware of that when you're considering this braking option. Again, we're feeling we're going to keep this vehicle for a long time, and so we were comfortable making that investment. Another thing that I really like about the Invisibrake is that there's no major installation into the RV itself, the towing motorhome. When we bought the Jeep, we knew we were going to be keeping the Jeep for a really long time, and as much as we love our Rocky, we were going to be switching the motorhome sooner than we'd be switching the vehicle that we're towing behind. We wanted a braking solution that would be very easy to transfer from one motorhome to another, and the Invisibrake definitely fit that bill. In fact, there was no installation at all into the motorhome. We just have this wireless monitor that we plug in to the 12 volt in the motorhome, and that is what all the installation into the motorhome, just plugging that into the 12 volt and watching that monitor when the system is active. Now, for those of you who are starting to think ahead on how this works using the braking lights to activate the brake system, you might be thinking, oh, well, if anytime you have your foot on the brake, the brakes are going to be slamming on the Jeep. That's not necessarily the case. The Invisibrake is actually a very smart system. So if you leave your foot on the brakes, it will slowly ramp up to maximum pressure over the course of 8 seconds. But if you have your foot on the brake for more than 15 seconds, it will stop using any braking force and let go. So if you happen to be riding your foot on the brake, it's only going to be doing it for 15 seconds. It's not going to burn up the brakes on your tow vehicle by just lightly touching the brakes. Similarly, when you're at a stoplight and you're at the stoplight for more than 15 seconds, you can keep your foot on the brake of the towing vehicle, and the brakes will release on the towed vehicle before you get ready to take off, so there's no resistance from the tow vehicle at the time you're taking off. Some of you also might be aware that when you use hazard lights, those are often activating the brake light signal on your vehicle. The Invisibrake also has built-in software to recognize the pattern of a hazard light, so it will not activate the brakes using a hazard light. Now, the Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk has an electronic assisted steering, and so it needs to keep that brain alive to be able to have the steering work properly when being towed. And since that needs to stay active, it can drain the battery when you're being towed. One of the great things about Invisibrake is that this system will actually charge your battery instead of discharging it. A lot of systems, especially portable systems, work on small air compressors, and they're pulling energy out of your battery to pump up that air compressor to use the brake pedal. Now, Invisibrake doesn't use nearly as much pressure because it's pulling a cable on an active braking system, not pushing on a dead system. So it's using less pressure. The electric charge coming from the motorhome to the towed can actually charge your battery on the tow vehicle, which is a really great feature. Now, one thing I need to mention on that is you will only be charging your battery if your lights are turned on. If you don't have your lights turned on, that current is not flowing through and will not be consistently charging your battery. So when you're using an Invisibrake system, if you want to be charging your battery, make sure you have your lights turned on while you're driving, whether it's day or night. All right, so that helps you understand the braking system we chose. Let's talk about a few other things specific to our Jeep. Now, our Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk is an automatic transmission. They are only sold in an automatic transmission. It's a 9-speed automatic, and it's really great to drive, but this system does take a few extra steps to get it into neutral. If you have a car that is a manual transmission, some manual transmission cars, all you gotta do is grab the gear shift, pull it out of gear and put it in neutral, and you're good to go. Make sure the parking brake's off. But the Jeep actually has a 17-step process to get the vehicle out of regular mode into towing mode, and that's just to get the transmission into neutral and being ready for tow. There's some additional steps on our 2015 Jeep that actually require opening the hood and installing a fuse after turning on a system that keeps the steering active. When this vehicle first came out in 2014 and early 15, this is just my opinion, but I believe that Jeep probably thought it was towable, but they started seeing some wobble from the tires. The steering system would start to wobble when they're being towed. Not always, but it did happen some. And because of that, they created an aftermarket part through Mopar, and when you install this part, that will help mitigate the wobbling problem. We're going to have a blog post related to this video that's going to have far more detail related to this and give you part numbers and how to follow that and some pricing. So make sure you jump over to the website, RVLove.com, and check out the related blog posts. We'll of course put links to those in the description below. So if you're looking for a tow vehicle to tow behind your motorhome, the Motorhome Magazine Dinghy Towing Guide is a great resource. We'll put a link for that in the description below as well. And that is a great place to start your research because it will dramatically narrow down which vehicles can be towed. But don't stop with your research right there, because the vehicles might need to be specifically optioned to be able to be towed, and they might have specific things like can only be towed for 200 miles at a time without stopping, starting the engine and running it through gears. A lot of little things to keep in mind. Just make sure you do your research when you're choosing a tow vehicle. One other thing we did with our Jeep that is a really cool custom thing for us is we got an extra set of the tow bar brackets, and we had the end cut off of them and then welded the red tow hooks from our Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk onto them, which keeps the look of the Jeep really authentic and original, makes it look just like all the other Trailhawks out there with the little red rescue hooks out front. And not only is it cosmetic, it still looks the same, but they actually still have functionality because they're locking in to the Roadmaster tow brackets that are used for the tow bar. So they're really strong and sturdy, so that we actually could still use those if we're off four-wheeling and need to put those rescue hooks to use. So what vehicles do you guys tow? We'd love to hear about what vehicles you tow behind your motorhomes. If you have a vehicle you've had to make specific modifications to be able to make it available to be towed four down, we'd love to see that too and share that with others to help others be aware of any potential items that need to be addressed on cars that they're looking at for tows. All right, thanks for joining today, everyone. I hope you found this video helpful in talking about a braking system we chose for towing our vehicle and a braking system you may choose to tow your vehicles. Hope you also picked up a few tips, things to consider when towing your vehicle. Just because a vehicle says it's towable four down doesn't mean the research ends there. There's usually a little bit more involved to make sure that your car is optioned with the specific options that make it able to be towed four down. Be sure to check over at the blog. We've got a lot more detail in the blog post than we're going to be covering in today's video. And until next time, we'll see you on the road.